Hey guys, welcome to your tutorial on how to draw a realistic eye. This is my all-time favorite thing to draw in the world. It was the first thing I really learned how to draw realistically. So I love eyes. I can't wait to see what you guys make. What you're gonna need is a pencil. Remember I was saying these pencils, like the kind of orangey ones, Papermate ones, I think they work a little bit better for shading than these ones, but it's up to you guys. If you are a mechanical pencil person and you really want to use a mechanical pencil, you can just be kind of careful because they don't really dull down the way that these ones do. If you like to blend and like shade your eye, don't use your finger because those fingers have oils on, Cheeto mess on. Get a Q-tip if you have one, or you can get like a soft paper towel or like a napkin or something, or tissue. But try not to use your finger because your fingers can smudge in a way that like looks not so nice sometimes. And then make sure you have an eraser. Okay, I'm gonna draw this really big. It's up to you guys how big you want to draw it. If you want to draw two eyes, maybe draw one a little smaller. But I'm gonna draw it big just for the sake of showing you. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get a nice curve. If you want to look in the mirror as you're working on this, it might help you guys. So maybe like prop up a mirror next to you, or you can just kind of follow along and draw a random eye like I'm doing. So when you're drawing your curve for the top of the eye, remember you want to make sure that your pencil is kind of facing towards the line you're drawing, and kind of use your hand as like a pivot as you're drawing it. If you need to, like move your paper as you're drawing the curve so that it's a nice even curve. You don't want it to be, too high up. We're going for like a soft hill, not like a mountain. And then you're going to do the same kind of thing on the bottom. But this piece right here is going to be like the inside of the eye. So this piece kind of needs to go down and like hook. Like a subtle kind of like fishing hook. And then you're gonna kind of curve it into the underneath curve of the eye. So think like, kind of looks a little bit like a lemon, but this piece does kind of come up a little bit. It's not doing like this. You don't want it to look like that. You want it to curve from this line and then come back in and subtly curve back down. So we don't want that. And then to do the bottom curve of the eye, you might want to turn your paper around so that you can pivot your hand again, and you're going to make a nice curve on the bottom too. So this point where the eye ends should be kind of in line with this point. So kind of meet your lines together. And that is your outline. I'm gonna erase this ugly thing. Okay. So everyone's is gonna look a little different. It's okay if it doesn't look exactly like mine. Everyone's eye shape is different anyway. Alrighty, the next thing you want to do is you want to draw the inside of your eye, so the circle inside of it. If you have something circular to draw around that's the right shape or the right size, you can go for it. But when you draw circles, just try and practice to start with. Your hand just goes around and around and around. I'm not even touching the paper yet. Just kind of get your hand like in that motion. And you kind of want to lightly go around and around, keeping your hand on the table until you have a nice perfect circle. So when you're drawing the circle in the middle of the eye, it shouldn't be huge. Like think about how big it actually is. It doesn't take up the whole eye. There's usually like an even distance on each side. So I'm just gonna kind of like put a little mark where I think the inside of my eye is gonna go, like that circle. And then it's gonna come down, but it's not gonna come all the way down on the eye because you usually do see a little bit of white space underneath the circle, underneath the iris. So mine's gonna be about that big. You can kind of map it out. And then I'm going to use my pencil, kind of hold it at an angle and try and get a nice circular shape by going around and around. It's okay if you have a bunch of lines because you're going to clean it up until it looks like a nice kind of perfect circle. So it might come up a little bit higher than the top of the eye. That is fine. Usually you don't see the whole iris inside of the eye, so sometimes it does come up above this point. But you don't want it to take up the whole eye, so you do want a little bit of white space underneath. Once you have your circle in there, just try and like perfect it, go over it, make sure the shape is right. Make the outline a little bit more defined, and then you can erase, you know, any extra stuff that you don't want from doing that crazy circle move. All right, so that is going to be my iris, and then inside of the iris is the pupil. So you have two circles inside of your eye. So the pupil should be directly in the center of this. Again, if you want to kind of like feel it out, draw like a mark where the inside of that iris is going to go, where the pupil is going to go. Sometimes I like to draw like 4 little spots and make sure that the distance between the outside of the iris and the outside of the pupil is the same all the way around. If your iris stops like up here and you can't see it, you want to make sure this is still in the center. So just make sure it looks even and in the center of the original circle. And then you're going to do your circle thing again. Go around and around until it's looking the way you want it to. And then we do have this thing in the center of our eye, usually. Usually it's in the pupil, but sometimes it's in the iris, in this outer circle. And it's a highlight. So if you look in the mirror and you see like a bright kind of reflection in your eye, that's called the light of life. That means you have liquid in your eye, and that means that your eyes are alive essentially because they have liquid in them. So that's why everyone has this kind of highlight in their eye. If you don't have it, it kind like when you're drawing it, it kind of makes the eye look a little bit vampire-ish, or you know, not super realistic because it doesn't, you know, have that reflection in. So sometimes it's like a rectangle, sometimes it's a circle. I'm just going to draw like a little kind of circle in the pupil. You could draw it out here if you wanted. I might do another little one, like a different size. It's up to you how many reflections you have. It just depends on what your eye looks like that day. If you're drawing a rectangle, try and curve it with the shape of the pupil. And like I said, you can also have reflections on this part too. And you can have reflections on the outside of it. All right, then you're gonna fill in your pupil around your highlights. When you're filling it in, try and shade in like a circular motion so that you're not getting like really streaky lines. When you shade in a circular motion or go in the direction of the shape you're trying to fill in, your lines aren't as obvious, so that you can kind of like make it look a little bit more neat and even. So this is like the darkest part of the eye, so you do want to fill it in a good amount. And just leave those highlights alone. All right, so this part, the iris, if you look in the mirror, you can see like a lot of lines coming out from the center. So those lines are gonna kind of look a little bit like a heartbeat on a monitor. So if you practice like on the side of your paper or on a different paper, kind of going up and down, kind of like a, you know, like a heart rate monitor, like that, varying the different lengths of the lines. That's kind of what you want to do in this section of your eye. So imagine that there is a dot in the center of your pupil. Your lines are going to be facing, always pointing towards the center of the pupil. So you're doing this kind of heart rate, like monitor thing, doing your pencil up and down, different lengths of line, but you're always facing the center of the pupil. So it's kind of like a sun ray coming out from the center of the eye. And you don't want them to go like that, because that doesn't really look realistic. You do want them to be close together so that it does look realistic. And you can always add, like, you know, lines that are specific to your eye. Like if your eye doesn't look like this, you can kind of make it look a little bit more like yours. And then you want to do the same thing coming in from the outside too. So it's pointing in towards the center. If you want to, you could do like the line all the way across, and then you could just erase in the center. I like to do it this way because the inside of our eyes aren't perfect, so I think usually they end up looking a little bit more like random like this. And if you want to use color pencils, you can use color for this part. Just make sure you're actually looking at, you know, an eye when you're coloring it so it looks realistic. So you're always facing these lines in towards the very center of the eye. If you have like a darker outline of the iris, you can go ahead and like make it darker around the outside. Clean it up a little bit. You've gone outside of the circle. Again, my pencil is always kind of pointing towards the line I'm going around, and I'm moving my hand around all the time. So try not to keep your hand in one place, and try and move your paper or move your hand around so it works for you. I'm going to make my pupil a little bit darker so it stands out a little bit more. Alrighty, and that's the inside of my eye. If you have an eraser and you want to kind of like smudge it, kind of go in the middle and like make it look a little bit more smooth, you can go over top of it, you know, with your eraser in some parts, still going in the direction pointing towards the inside of the eye. Alrighty, so next thing is we're going to add in detail to the inside of the eye. So this part is like a little fleshy part. You kind of want to follow the curve of the bottom of the eye and just kind of like curve it off. Not too dark, like try and like keep your pencil kind of light when you're doing that. And then this fleshy part, it does have like a little bit of a darker shade than the white of the eye. So just try and fill it in lightly with your pencil. You can go in circular motions, you can go in the direction of this curve. And then it does have a little bit of a highlight usually because there's still liquid in it. So maybe take your eraser and just kind of like lighten up a section of it, like the inside, so it has like a highlight inside of it. Kind of helps if you have a smaller eraser. Okay, I'm gonna erase this up here so this isn't in the way. Sorry, my table is rocking around a bit. All right, so the top of the eye, the eyelid, the eyelid kind of comes a little bit up from the fleshy part of the eye. So you're not connecting it to this, you're kind of coming up a bit. And then it kind of comes up and it's going like parallel almost to the top curve of the eye. So you're just kind of drawing like a nice parallel curve. And then the distance between here and here is definitely going to be a little bit wider than the distance between here and here. So just kind of end it a little bit higher up. And that's like your eyelid. Don't put the eyebrow in until the end because eyebrows, you can end up putting them really low down and they look a little bit funny. All right, so that is my eyelid. I like to say if you're doing it big like mine, a finger distance is a good kind of distance on the right hand side if it's as big as mine. Okay, now we're gonna do the eyelashes. The eyelashes are a little tricky, so bear with me, okay? When you're drawing eyelashes, you want to draw them coming out from the top line and they're curving down and back towards the back of the eye. So it's kind of like a flick of the wrist. Don't draw too many to start with. just kind of draw a few. So the ones on the right hand side are curving down and back towards the back of the eye. They sometimes go over top of the eyelid, sometimes they don't. As you come in towards the middle of the eye, they get a little bit more, they start pointing upwards a little bit more. So it's kind of like a clock. So here they're going to kind of still dip down a little bit, but they're going to point up more as they get into the middle of the eye. When they're in the middle of the eye, they then curve in the opposite direction. So they're kind of like now going in this direction. So you curve, flick your wrist, and now they're curving towards the left side of the eye. And they're getting smaller and smaller until there aren't really any at the front of the eye. Then you can always add more. You can kind of like go ahead and just kind of add some more in depending on how many eyelashes you have. You can make them thicker if you want to make them look like they're, you know, wearing mascara or something. The ones at the back of the eye are generally longer. Some of them, sometimes they cross over each other. You know, they're not always perfect, so sometimes they're kind of crossing a little bit. But the trick is to kind of make sure they're curving to the right on the right hand side, to the left on the left hand side, and kind of upwards in the middle. On the bottom, they don't come out of this line. They come out of a line a little bit lower down. So you want to really, really lightly draw a very faint line parallel to the bottom line of your eye. So just try and make a faint line underneath it. It doesn't have to come all the way in, like maybe stop it like right here, but you're drawing a faint line. Make sure it's not super dark, and your eyelashes are coming out of that on the bottom, because you have, this is called like a little, like a duct. That's where like your tears kind of come out of. So they're coming out of this line, and they're curving up this time and out towards the back. They're smaller on the bottom, so they're not as long, but again, they're curving up, out of the line, so it kind of like goes up and out and back, and you're flicking your wrist. When you get to the middle of the eye, they just come up and like straight down, and then when you're in the middle, they start to go in the opposite direction, and they get much smaller and kind of fewer as you get towards the inside of the eye. Okay, with shading, you see a little bit of shadow on the outside of the white of the eye. So when you're shading, like this part and this part, because your eyeball is round, you are going to see it kind of go back into the eye socket. So when you're shading, you want to really, really lightly use your pencil and shade kind of in like a curved motion. It's going to be darker on the outside of the eye, and as you come in, it gets lighter. So like we did with the value scale on like the very first lesson, darker on the outside, not too dark though, because remember this is still white, and lighter as you come in. At this point, you can use your Q-tip if you have one and kind of like smooth it out a little bit so that you don't see, you know, any lines. And you can just kind of like move your Q-tip around, blend it in a little bit. Same thing on this side. It's going to be darker on this side. Go in a curved motion, similar to this curve. As you come in, you want to make your pencil lighter, and you're only doing a little bit of it. You're not doing like the whole eye, because remember the eye is still white. Then you can take your Q-tip, blend it out if you want to. Make it look like a little bit smoother. All right, underneath the top of the eyelid, like right here, there is going to be a little bit of a shadow, so you're going to kind of go along this line, come in just a little bit, only a tiny bit, just to make it look like that eyelid is coming over top of the eye. So when I'm shading, I'm going in the direction of the curve. I'm moving my paper so that my pencil is always facing towards the line, and I'm just adding a little bit of a shadow underneath and fading it just the tiniest bit, like that. Same with the eyelid. There's going to be a little bit of a shadow underneath the eyelid. So take your pencil and just go a little darker and then fade it to light, because it creases in, so this part is going to be darker. So you want a little bit of a shadow here underneath that eyelid. And then you might see a little bit of a shadow right here where the eye kind of dips in. So if you want to take your pencil and just really, really lightly kind of add a little bit of a shadow right there where your kind of eye socket is. So you're not going all the way up to the eye. You're just doing a little bit underneath. And then I'm going to take my Q-tip and just kind of blend it out. You don't have to add this in if, you know, it kind of does look like the eye has bags, but it makes it look a little bit more realistic. Alrighty, and then the last thing is the eyebrow. So when you're drawing an eyebrow, I would say do at least, if you're doing an eye this big, at least 3 fingers up on either side. So my eyebrow is going to start like right here, and it's going to end like right here. You want to kind of draw the line, like the curve of the line to start with. So again, make sure your pencil is underneath, kind of following the curve of the eye. And then when you're drawing your hairs, they kind of start by going upright on the top. So kind of like get in the motion of like moving your pencil like this, kind of like hairs. So they go upright up here, and then as they come around, they start to curve and kind of curve in the direction of that curve that you drew underneath. It shouldn't be perfect. Some of the hairs should be overlapping each other. Shouldn't be too short, shouldn't be too long. You can make it as thick as you want, but right here it starts to really curve, and then it goes downwards in the curve of the line. So make sure your pencil is a little bit dull so it doesn't look, you know, really perfect. And you shouldn't be pressing too hard. You're kind of layering when you're doing this. And then just kind of keep adding hairs until you feel like it looks the way you want it to. But the trick is making sure these hairs are pointing upright at the top and then curving back towards each other. Okay, and that is an eye. Good luck. I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with. And I will see you next time. Alrighty guys, bye.